Welcome back, everybody. In this last video for this week, at least I think it's the last video for the week, we are going to cover the Fprintf command. And this is a weird one and takes a little bit of thinking about. And so I encourage you to think about it, play with it, and see how it works. But we're going to kind of step through the complexity a little bit so you can see how it works. The power to this is it will repeat data in a set array. So you can so you can see in a single line some text and in a single line text and as a sentence with values built into it. That's a really bad explanation, but let me show you. Let's start with an example of, say, countdown. I'm going to create a variable called countdown, and in the countdown variable we're going to say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Why? Because it's a countdown. Now in this countdown, I'm going to now use the Fprintf command, and I can type in this Fprintf, much like the display command, what I want it to say. So I want it to say days until spring break. Now, in this command, I can make it reply, and it's going to, in the Fprintf command, print this. And then if I tell it to print a variable, it'll print a variable number there. I tell it I'm going to print a variable by calling out the percent sign. The percent sign tells the Fprintf command, hey, wait, expect a number to be put into here from a variable. Okay, and now I have to specify the format of that variable. And here I can specify how many spaces to make before and after it. So 5. Or 0. I can have it no spaces. It just will fill in as it wants. I can also specify how many spaces after a period in that format. I can say 0. I'll just say 0.0 for sake of argument for this first one. And then I'm going to tell it it's going to be a floating point value or a fixed point notation. And that's it. It could actually be an exponential notation if I said e. It could be decimal notation if I wanted to, or strings even if it was a string variable. That would be kind of weird to do it this way. It has to actually be s here, not zeros, but you get the idea. So I'm going to say 0.0f, and we'll just leave it at that. And then hit enter. Now if I do this and hit comma, I'm going to now tell it what variable I want it to pull numbers from for this. So I'll say countdown. This is the command I'm doing. So if I hit enter, what happens? Oh, well, hey, look. It says days until spring break 5, days until spring break 4, days until spring break 3, 2, 1. Well, that doesn't look really good. It's all on one line. I'm going to tell it to do it onto multiple lines. Oops. And I'm going to do that by telling it to put a return or an enter with a /n. So if I do that, you now see it's repeating days until spring break 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it'll repeat this until it runs out of variables and it's done. So if I had the countdown, I can get rid of that. If I had the countdown of just 5, and then I did days until countdown, spring break, it just does 5, and we are done. That is the end of the story. But again, that's not very, I guess you could say, satisfying or exciting. So what could we do that's a little bit more interesting? Well, let's think of another example where we might have matched values. And so, for example, I'm going to take the thermodata example. So I'm going to say load thermodata, and in this one, I am going to take students is equal to thermo scores, and that's going to be all of 1, right? There you go. And then I'm going to say test1 is equal to thermo scores, and that's going to be that comma 2. Great. So we're going to see CLC. So now we're going to have that. Now let's say I wanted to have an Fprintf command for this data set. Well, I'm going to have to create a new table just comparing thermo scores and thermodata. I'm going to do this by entering in Fprintf, or I'm going to create a new table called students, or called let's call this data, and we're just going to equal to students test1, and I'm going to invert the matrix or transpose the matrix, and I'll explain a little bit why after we do the fprintf command, so you can see what the point of that is. But for the time being, what we're going to do is do fprintf, and now I'm going to tell it to say student number and $0 dot, let's give it, we'll make a space for that. We say 2.0 f student number 1, I'm going to do apostrophes, score, test 1 score is, and we'll say $, we'll give it 3.0 f comma data, and we're going to need to put in the /n so we can have a repeat each term. Data, hit enter, and you'll now see student number 1's test score 1 is that. And you can see the output is somewhat repetitive, but it becomes very clean and clear what it is that's being done and what it is that's being said, and how this all works. Some of the things I want you to see in this feature here now is this 2, the space of 2, is what allows us to align things a little bit cleaner. If we didn't say a space of 2 and just said 0, you'll notice it didn't give any spacing here. So this didn't shift over, and this ended up shifting when the numbers got bigger. If I gave it a space of something silly like 10, it'll make more sense of what's happening. It's making a placeholder of 10 positions before the number so that things can line up cleaner as you'd want. You can also specify values after the integer to display, and it'll give you rounding to that value for that number if there's points to be rounded to. So that just gives you a sense of how this numbers work out and how these formatting works out. Now let me get to the next point of the order, and that is how the actual fprintf command actually works. So I'm going to make a simpler, I'm going to use the countdown function now, and let's do an fprintf. I'm going to clear. We're going to do an fprintf of the number, and I'll just say $, and we'll say f 0.f and not $, I'm sorry, %, and we'll say the next number $0.0f. We'll end that there, and we'll say /n/ apostrophe and countdown. And that, fprintf. The number, the next number, and it gives you the value. So you'll see here, when you do countdown, let's do countdown is equal to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Do fprintf, and you'll see what happens here is 5, and then the very next variable number index gets put next. It doesn't care. MATLAB doesn't care in this function what columns and numbers are. It's just going to look at, as each time it finds a $, it's going to take the next number in that array and plug it into the next position. And 3 and 2 and 1, and then since it ends, it doesn't know what to do, so it's going to end the result and go forward. In our case, for example, in the data example, we had to, in order to make this work right, transpose the values so that this first number, this was index 1, it would present that one, and then next index 2 number would presented this one. Then this was index 3, index 4, index 5, index 6. It doesn't care. This fprintf command does not care about the columns and rows. It only cares about the raw index. So if I had said countdown and put an apostrophe symbol here and then ended that, we'd get oops, sorry, not countdown, but let's do the, if we said, go here, CLC, if I said fprintf and I went to the student name data and I did the colon there, it'd still work perfectly because the numbers, even though data colon stacks it all into one single column, the index positions are still the same, so this works perfectly. So when you do the fprintf command, you have to be very cognizant of the order that the data is in. And oftentimes, the simplest way, and the way I always like to think of it in this case, because since I like to see like thermal scores, is in the row is lined up by columns. All you'd have to do in the fprintf command is simply do the transpose, and you get the right answer. So for example, if I change this, and let's make this a little bit, let's say 2, 0, fprintf test1 score. We'll say test1 is, and then we can, and then I could say test2 is $2 %0 2f, and test3 is %2.0f, and instead of pulling it from data now, we can actually pull it from thermal scores. If I said thermal scores, we're going to get something completely illogical because obviously it's not lined up properly. But if we said thermal scores transpose, then we'll have a very nice lineup of 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way to 20, and the test1 score, the test2 score, and the test3 scores as they fit into the columns. So again, fprintf is probably your most functional and useful output to display more complex data, especially trends in data as your things if you want to do it in a text written format. But you have to make sure that you understand how to organize the data variable that inputs into it so that you don't accidentally transpose things. So like I said, make sure that you remember, get that clear, practice a little bit, and you will be fine. So with all that said, I think that's the end for this sequence for this week. Have a great spring break, and we will go through some things on Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday will obviously be another help session example of what we're going to do. Thursday we'll go a quiz and give some more examples, and you'll have spring break. You'll come back, we'll talk about if-then statements, logical functions, structured programming loops, for loops, and so forth. And hopefully over spring break you won't forget too much of the MATLAB. But we'll see you this week. Take care.